A number of bizarre events occurred in the summer of 2001. Like a sudden imbalance of fate within our vicinity, a few individuals had suddenly excelled exponentially while the unlucky ones had died an unimaginably gruesome death. An old man who was drowning in debt unexpectedly won the lottery and instantly became a millionaire. On the other hand, a body was found with his limbs forcibly coiled around his own neck to choke him to death while breaking his bones in several places during the process. These seemingly unnatural happenings had occurred almost consecutively within just a couple of months, and the rumors claimed that they were all connected to a strange website that was being spread in secret within the community. Along with the surge of new rock bands and modern rappers at the time, there was another topic going around amongst the teenagers. Aside from pop culture, we were also fond of talking about controversial things. Our math teacher just stopped attending the class and was replaced by a substitute a month before we had our vacation. The faculty didn't tell us any reason why he stopped showing up, but amongst the students, there was a rumor that they found him dead in his apartment, and the cause of it was unknown. They said that his body was severely broken and warped. His legs and arms were extensively stretched and wrapped around his deformed body like tangled ropes. Needless to say, nobody could explain how it was done. Followed by the former math teacher's absence, a student that he often yelled at and humiliated was excelling significantly. One of our common acquaintances named Jerome, who was known to be the class idiot, unexpectedly went up the overall rankings. He never passed any exam unless he cheated prior to this surprising change, and it appeared as if his brain was overhauled when he suddenly became active in recitation and remarkably diligent in his studies. Coincidentally, this pattern of contrasting events was similar to the controversial stories that we already heard about. Our class president Tina was the daughter of a local police, and she said that her father was getting frustrated about these cases of mysterious deaths piling up, and they couldn't figure out what it was all about. There was obviously foul play involved due to bastardized bodies of the victims, but authorities had no idea why the assailants would reach such an extent just to punish their unsuspecting targets. 6 victims had died in the same grotesque manner. Their bodies were all excessively bent, folded, warped, and twisted to coil themselves with their own limbs. There were no signs of forced entry at the scenes of the crimes, and there was no significant connection between each of them. It seemed that they were only chosen randomly by the unknown perpetrators, but a few students suggested otherwise. According to them, these individuals accessed a secret website and gambled with their own lives. There was a rumor about a mysterious site that was found in the dark web, and the paranormal aspect of this website became a hot topic amongst different circles of young and old. It was simply called Writher, and the purpose of the site was just as what the title would suggest. It could either give a sudden twist of fate to the user's life or be literally twisted to death. According to the stories, it could only be accessed by one person at a time, and he or she would be asked to enter 2 names. The other name must be someone which the user personally knew, and then he or she would play a simple game of luck. Between these 2 individuals, one would receive a reward while the other would suffer the punishment. Users willingly gambled with their own lives and of the other unknowing individual in attempt to receive a favorable outcome despite of the risk involved. In exchange for gambling with their well-being and of another, they could win a rather miraculous reward. Since it was required for the second name to be of someone that the player personally knew, it was expected that the effect of the website would linger within one community until someone would enter an outsider's name. Stories around campus had claimed that this mysterious site was first entered by the owner of our local internet cafe, whose wife was dying from lung cancer. One day, his wife just suddenly recovered from her illness. At the same time, the authorities discovered a dead body which happened to be the wife's former lover. Like the bizarre conditions of the victims that followed, his body was severely distorted and wound like a limp doll that was harshly played with. His ankles were tied together several times over under his chin, coming from the back with both his knees hanging over his nape. His arms were coiled around his folded body with his right elbow reaching his left shoulder. All his fingers were intertwined like twist wires to keep the arms in bind. The amount of bone fractures were almost uncountable that his body would have fallen apart if not for his muscles that were severely torn as well. Such a cruel act of murder would have been hard to believe, but it was all over the local news. The following victims of the same inexplicable case were already kept in the dark in order to avoid panic from the community aside from the authorities' pride and reliability hanging on the line. Our classmate Tina had confirmed these deaths when she told us about her father's frustrations about the case, but there wasn't any proof about its connection with the strange website since it was already hard to believe to begin with. Out of youthful brashness and curiosity, my friends and I had decided to try and access the mysterious site to see it for ourselves. We stayed over at Jared's house, which was just a few blocks away from ours. We tried to access the site, but it only kept on showing an error page after trying hundreds of times the entire day. Just to pass the time, we started drinking when the night finally came. As we were all getting buzzed, Jared jokingly spoke to me and said that I didn't deserve my girlfriend. We both had a crush on my girl back when we were younger, but I ended up dating her when we got older while Jared loitered around with other things. A few hours later, when some of our friends had suddenly passed out, something different finally appeared on the screen. Goosebumps crawled all over my skin as we saw the strange website in the stories. I personally didn't think that it was real, and so did Jared. In a rather dull black page, there were 2 typing spaces in parallel where 2 names must be entered. When he scrolled down, there were 3 cards facing down with the caricature of a grinning man on the back. We assumed that the small set of cards was the minigame which the rumors referred to. However, the blank spaces had to be filled in order to access the game. Jared decided to type a fake name on the spaces just to be safe, but when he pressed enter, we were kicked out of the site, and his computer suddenly shut down. Out of shock, Jared and I looked at each other in the eye without saying a single word. Since we discovered that the site was real and responded quickly when he entered false names, we both decided to stop the foolishness there. We called it a night and went home. Few days later, my mom suddenly received an unexpected call. I was living with my mom back then, and I had to work 2 jobs in order to afford my school expenses. One morning, Mom stormed into my room and said that my father had passed away. He left us on our own while I was just an infant, and I had no recollection of him whatsoever. Apparently, he died while he was on the job, and he left everything he owned under my name. There was a huge amount in his account, and I was suddenly absolved from my debt with just a single call. This sudden turn of event was quite surprising, and so the thought hit me. I suspected that someone accessed the mysterious website and entered my name. Luckily for me, this person must have received the bitter end instead. I called Jared to tell him all about it, but he wasn't answering his phone. I decided to go into his house instead, and it was then when I discovered the person who used my name to gamble with his fate. Jared was living on his own, and nobody would have known if anything happened to him. I often visited him by going through the window since he was always blasting music through his big speakers. He normally couldn't hear if anyone was knocking at his door, but during that time, his place was eerily quiet. Just like the usual, I entered his house through the open window after calling him out several times without receiving any response. My knees shook and buckled until I fell on the floor as I was profoundly terrified by what I saw. Jared was dead, and his deformed body was lying in front of his computer. His legs were tightly twisted together, and his body was folded severely. His bottom was touching the back of his head. His arms were coiled across his face and around his waist, and his bent arms were held in place by his right hand that was forcibly shoved into his mouth. After discovering that the strange website was real, Jared probably accessed it again and entered my name. Unfortunately for him, he lost the game. As a result, I had my positive twist of fate while he received a horrible death.